I was 10 years old when my father went to prison. My mother told me he'd been arrested for embezzlement, that he'd stolen money from his company and betrayed everyone who trusted him. She said he was a criminal, a liar, and that he'd abandoned us. For 5 years I believed her. I grew up thinking my father was a terrible person who'd chosen crime over his family. Mom would cry sometimes and say how much he'd hurt us, how ashamed we should be. She told me Dad didn't want to see me, that he'd specifically said he wanted nothing to do with me because I reminded him of his failures. So I never visited him. I never wrote letters. I tried to forget I even had a father. But everything changed when I turned 15. I was cleaning out the attic looking for old photo albums when I found a box hidden behind the insulation. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me, all from Dad, all unopened. My hands shook as I looked at the dates. They started from the week he was arrested and continued for years. He'd been writing to me all along. I sat in that dusty attic and opened the first letter with trembling fingers. "My dearest Clara," it began. "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know the truth. I didn't do what they're accusing me of. Your mother knows this, but she's letting me take the fall for something she did. I love you more than anything in this world. Please don't believe the lies she's telling you." My heart pounded as I read letter after letter. Dad explained everything. How Mom had been embezzling money from his company for years, how she'd carefully framed him when the auditors started getting close, how she'd manipulated evidence to make him look guilty. He wrote about how much he missed me, how he'd tried to reach out through lawyers and prison officials, but Mom had blocked every attempt. "She's poisoned you against me," one letter said. "But I understand. You're just a child. You believe your mother because that's what children do. I don't blame you, sweetheart. I just hope that someday you'll learn the truth." I finished reading all 43 letters as the sun set outside the attic window. By the time I was done, my entire world had shattered and rebuilt itself into something I didn't recognize. My mother was a liar. Worse than that, she was a criminal who'd let an innocent man go to prison for her crimes. And she'd stolen 15 years of my relationship with my father. I wanted to run downstairs and scream at her, to throw the letters in her face and demand answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the calculated way Dad described her in the letters. "Your mother is smart and careful," he'd written. "She plans everything. If you ever discover the truth, be cautious. Don't confront her until you have protection and proof." So instead of confronting her, I carefully put the letters back in the box and hid them in my closet. I went downstairs and ate dinner with Mom like nothing had changed, even though everything had. "How was your day, sweetie?" Mom asked, smiling that warm smile I'd trusted my entire life. "Fine," I said, forcing myself to smile back. "Just normal." But nothing would ever be normal again. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dad sitting in a prison cell, innocent, while Mom lived free in our comfortable house built with money she'd stolen. I thought about all the times she'd badmouthed him, all the lies she'd told, all the moments she'd comforted me about having a criminal father when she was the real criminal. The next morning I started my own investigation. I couldn't just rely on Dad's letters. I needed to verify everything he'd said. I needed proof that would stand up if I ever decided to expose her. I started by researching Dad's case online. I found old news articles about his arrest and trial. The evidence against him had seemed solid at the time. Financial records showing transfers to offshore accounts, emails authorizing suspicious transactions, testimony from company employees about his behavior. But Dad's letters had explained how Mom had fabricated it all. She'd had access to his computer and passwords. She'd forged his signature on documents. She'd coached employees on what to say. Reading the news articles with this new perspective, I started seeing cracks in the prosecution's case. The evidence was almost too perfect. Every piece pointed directly to Dad with no ambiguity, no room for doubt. Real crimes are messier than that. Over the following weeks, I became obsessed with uncovering the truth. I taught myself about financial forensics, reading everything I could find online. I learned about metadata, digital fingerprints, and how to spot forged documents. All while maintaining the pretense that I was Mom's loving, trusting daughter. "You've been spending a lot of time on the computer lately," Mom commented one evening. "Is everything okay at school?" "Just working on a project," I lied smoothly. "Research for history class." She smiled and ruffled my hair. "That's my girl. Always so dedicated to your studies." I wanted to pull away from her touch, but I didn't. I couldn't let her know that I knew. Not yet. I needed to be as calculating as she was. I started visiting the library, using their computers to research so Mom wouldn't see my search history. I found court documents from Dad's trial. I studied the financial records that had been used as evidence. And slowly I began to see the pattern Dad had described. The offshore account supposedly belonging to Dad had been opened using information that only Mom would have known. His mother's maiden name, the street he grew up on, his first pet's name. The emails authorizing fraudulent transactions had been sent during hours when Dad's computer showed he was logged into other systems, making it impossible for him to have sent them. The signatures on incriminating documents had subtle differences from Dad's real signature. Differences so small that they'd been missed during trial, but visible when you knew to look for them. 3 months after finding the letters, I did something that scared me. I wrote to Dad. I didn't tell him I'd found his letters or that I knew the truth. I just said I'd been thinking about him and wanted to reconnect. I mailed it from a post office across town so Mom wouldn't see it. 2 weeks later, I got a response sent to a P.O. box I'd rented using birthday money. "Clara, my sweet girl," Dad wrote. "You don't know how much your letter meant to me. I've thought about you every single day for the past 5 years. I understand if you're angry with me. Your mother has probably told you terrible things and you're too young to know what really happened. But please know that I love you, I'm innocent, and I never wanted to be separated from you." His response was careful, measured. He didn't badmouth Mom or protest his innocence too strongly. He was protecting me, I realized. Even from prison, even after everything, he was trying to shield me from the truth because he thought I was too young to handle it. That made me angrier at Mom than anything else. Dad was being a parent even in the worst circumstances. Mom was being a monster while pretending to be a saint. I started visiting Dad in prison. I told Mom I was going to the library or to friends' houses. The first time I saw him in person, I almost broke down. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, with gray streaking through his hair. But his eyes, those were the same kind eyes from my childhood memories. "Clara," he said, his voice breaking. "You came." We sat across from each other with a glass partition between us, talking through phones. I wanted to tell him I knew everything, but I couldn't. Not in a monitored prison visiting room where Mom might find out. So instead, I just talked about school, about my life, rebuilding the connection that had been stolen from us. Dad never said anything bad about Mom during our visits. He asked about her, made sure she was taking care of me, acted like a concerned co-parent rather than a wrongfully convicted man. That restraint, that dignity, told me everything I needed to know about who my parents really were. Over the next year, I visited Dad once a month. Mom never suspected because I'd become an expert at deception. Learned from the best, after all. During those visits, Dad and I grew close again. He helped me with homework through the phone, gave me advice about friends and school, told me stories about his childhood. By the time I turned 16, I'd gathered significant evidence of Mom's crimes. I had Dad's letters explaining the frame-up. I had my own analysis of the financial documents showing the inconsistencies. I had records proving the offshore account had been opened with information only Mom knew. I'd even tracked down one of Dad's former colleagues who privately admitted they'd been pressured by Mom to testify against Dad. She told me if I didn't say he'd been acting suspicious, she'd make sure I lost my job. The colleague, a woman named Vanessa, told me during a secret meeting. I was a single mother. I couldn't afford to lose my income. "I'm so ashamed of what I did. Would you testify to the truth now?" I asked. Vanessa hesitated. "Your father's already been convicted. What good would it do? It would prove he's innocent. It would free him." Vanessa looked at me with sad eyes. "Honey, I admire your faith in your dad. But overturning a conviction is nearly impossible. It would take years of legal battles and money you probably don't have." She was right, of course. I was 16 with no resources, no legal standing, no power. But I had something else. I had patience and I had a plan. I decided to wait. I would gather more evidence, document everything, and when the time was right, when I was old enough, strong enough, and had enough proof, I would destroy the carefully constructed life Mom had built on lies. In the meantime, I played the role of the dutiful daughter perfectly. I got good grades, had friends, acted normal. Mom never suspected that every smile I gave her was fake, that every "I love you" tasted like poison in my mouth. On my 17th birthday, Mom threw me a party. Friends came over, there was cake and presents, and Mom gave a touching speech about how proud she was of me. You've grown into such an amazing young woman despite everything we've been through, she said, her eyes glistening with fake tears. Losing your father was hard on both of us, but we've survived together. I'm so grateful for you, Clara. Everyone applauded. I hugged her and thanked her, playing my part. But inside I was counting down the days until I could expose her. That night, after everyone left, I added detailed notes to the journal I'd been keeping. A record of every lie Mom had told, every manipulation, every moment of false emotion. Someday this journal would be evidence. When I turned 18, I gained access to a trust fund my grandmother had left me. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to hire a private investigator. I found a man named Howard Pierce who specialized in financial crimes. I told him everything and showed him all my evidence. Howard studied the documents for weeks. Finally, he called me to his office. "Clara, this is remarkable work for someone your age," he said. "You've uncovered significant evidence of fraud and evidence tampering. Your mother is guilty and your father was framed. Can we prove it in court?" I asked. "Possibly. But it won't be easy. We need more. We need to connect your mother directly to the forged documents and the offshore account. We need to prove she had the means, motive, and opportunity to frame your father. What do you suggest?" Howard leaned back in his chair. "We need to catch her in the act. Or get her to confess. She'll never confess. She's too smart for that." "Everyone makes mistakes eventually," Howard said. "Especially people who think they've gotten away with it. Your mother has been living free for 8 years. He's comfortable, confident. That makes people careless. So we set a trap. Howard helped me install monitoring software on Mom's computer. Legal because I lived in the house and had access to shared devices. Over the following months, we tracked her activity. What we discovered shocked even me. Mom was still embezzling. She'd gotten a job at another company and was slowly siphoning money into hidden accounts. "She can't help herself," Howard explained. "This is who she is. She's a compulsive thief who's good at covering her tracks." We documented everything. Every transfer, every falsified record, every stolen dollar. We built a case not just for Dad's wrongful conviction, but for Mom's ongoing criminal activity. Meanwhile, I kept up my double life. I'd started college studying criminology and justice. Mom was so proud, telling everyone her daughter wanted to make the world a better place. The irony was almost funny. During my second year of college, Dad became eligible for parole. Mom fought it, writing letters to the parole board about how dangerous he was, how he'd shown no remorse. The parole was denied. That night, I held Mom while she pretended to cry with relief. "I was so scared they'd let him out," she said. "I know he's your father, but he's not a good man, Clara. You're safer with him behind bars." I comforted her, stroked her hair, told her it would be okay. And I added another entry to my journal about her calculated cruelty. By my 20th birthday, I had everything I needed. Howard and I had built an airtight case proving Mom's guilt in both the original crime and her current embezzlement. We had testimony from Vanessa and 2 other colleagues willing to admit they'd lied under pressure. We had forensic analysis of the forged documents. We had digital evidence of Mom's ongoing crimes. But I still waited. I wanted one more thing. I wanted Mom to incriminate herself directly. I wanted her to admit what she'd done in her own words on record. Howard suggested we try to get her to confess during a confrontation, but I had a better idea. Mom and I had started doing a monthly mother-daughter dinner at nice restaurants. During these dinners, Mom would drink wine and get nostalgic talking about the past. I started steering these conversations toward Dad and his arrest. "Do you ever wonder if Dad really did it?" I asked one evening as casually as I could. Mom took a sip of wine. "Of course he did it. The evidence was overwhelming. But he always maintained his innocence. What if he's telling the truth?" Mom laughed, a cold sound that made my skin crawl. "Criminals always claim they're innocent, sweetie. Your father is a liar. He stole from his company and destroyed our family. Don't waste sympathy on him." Over several months, I slowly planted seeds of doubt, carefully hidden recording devices in my purse capturing every conversation. I mentioned how I'd been studying wrongful convictions in school. I talked about cases where innocent people had been framed. I wondered aloud how someone could live with themselves knowing they'd sent an innocent person to prison. Mom grew increasingly uncomfortable with these conversations. She started drinking more. During our dinners, becoming defensive and irritable. Then on a cold November evening during my junior year of college I made my move. We were at Mom's favorite restaurant. She was on her third glass of wine. I'd been talking about my criminology class and the psychology of criminals. My professor says the worst criminals are the ones who manipulate others into taking the blame, I said. People who frame innocent people are especially cruel because they not only commit crimes but also destroy someone else's life to save themselves. Mom's hand tightened around her wine glass. That's enough, Clara. Can we talk about something else? Did you know that forensic technology has advanced so much in the past 10 years? I continued. Cases from the early 2000s are being reopened all the time. Evidence that seemed solid back then can now be proven fake. Signatures can be analyzed. Digital fingerprints can be traced. The truth always comes out eventually. Mom's face had gone pale. Why are you talking about this? Because I've been thinking about Dad, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. About his case. About how perfect the evidence against him was. Almost too perfect. Mom set down her wine glass carefully. Your father is guilty, Clara. I know you want to believe otherwise, but you need to accept reality. Is it reality? I asked. Or is it the story you've been telling yourself for 10 years? What are you implying? Mom's voice had turned cold. I leaned forward. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. The offshore account was opened using information only you would have known. The emails were sent while Dad was logged into other systems. The signatures on the documents don't quite match his real signature. And the witnesses who testified against him have privately admitted they were pressured by you. Mom's face cycled through shock, fear, and then anger. Where is this coming from? Has your father been filling your head with lies? Dad doesn't know I'm here, I said calmly. This is all my own research. 10 years of research, actually. The truth came out carefully measured. I told her about finding the letters when I was 15. About the years I'd spent investigating. About the evidence I'd gathered. With each revelation, Mom's expression shifted until finally she looked defeated. You've known for 5 years, she whispered. And you've been pretending all this time? I learned from the best, I said. You pretended to be a grieving victim while you were actually a calculating criminal. I just pretended to be your loving daughter while I built the case against you. Mom stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Why didn't you turn me in? Why wait? Because I needed to be sure. Because I needed enough evidence that you couldn't wiggle out of it. And because I wanted you to know that I knew. I wanted you to understand that all those years you thought you'd fooled me, you hadn't. Mom laughed bitterly. So what now? You're going to turn me in? Destroy your own mother. You destroyed my father, I said. An innocent man has spent 10 years in prison because of you. You stole a decade of my relationship with him. You made me hate him, made me think he'd abandon me. Yes, I'm going to turn you in. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Clara, please, Mom said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. You're my daughter. We can work this out. I did it for us, for our future. Your father was holding me back. Stop, I interrupted. Just stop lying. I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Mom's expression hardened. You have no idea what you're doing. Do you think the justice system will care about your amateur detective work? I have lawyers, connections, resources. You're just a 20-year-old college student playing detective. I'm a 20-year-old college student with 10 years of documented evidence, witness testimony, forensic analysis, and recordings of our conversations, I corrected. Including this one. I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording app that had been running the entire dinner. Mom's face went white. You recorded me without my consent? That's illegal. Actually, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. I consented. It's completely legal. I checked the laws carefully years ago. Mom stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over her wine glass. I need to go. Sit down, Mom, I said firmly. We're not done. Something in my voice made her sit. Maybe she heard the steel that had developed over 10 years of careful planning. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen, I continued. Tomorrow morning, I'm giving all my evidence to the district attorney. They'll open an investigation into both your original frame-up of Dad and your current embezzlement. You'll be arrested, prosecuted, and convicted. Dad will be exonerated and released from prison. And you'll get to experience what he's experienced for the past 10 years. Losing your freedom, your reputation, your relationship with your child. The only difference is that you actually deserve it. Tears streamed down Mom's face. Claire, please. I'm your mother. I raised you, took care of you, loved you. You manipulated me, I corrected. You used me as a prop in your victim narrative. You let me grow up thinking my father was a criminal who didn't love me. That's not love. That's abuse. I was protecting you. Mom insisted. Your father would have fought for custody. I would have lost you, so you framed him for embezzlement to make sure he went to prison? Do you hear yourself? I shook my head in disgust. You didn't protect me. You protected yourself. You always have. Mom buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Part of me, a small part that remembered being a little girl who loved her mother, wanted to comfort her. But the larger part, the part that had grown cold and calculating over 10 years of deception, felt nothing but satisfaction. I gave you 10 years, I said quietly. 10 years to come clean, to confess, to make things right. You could have turned yourself in at any time. You could have freed Dad and accepted the consequences of your actions. But you didn't. So now I'm making that choice for you. I stood up and put money on the table for the bill. This is the last dinner we'll ever have together as mother and daughter. I thought you should know that. Clara, wait. Mom grabbed my arm. Please. Just give me a chance to explain everything. There were circumstances you don't understand. I pulled my arm free. I understand perfectly. You're a thief and a liar who destroyed an innocent man's life to cover your crimes. There's nothing else I need to understand. I walked out of the restaurant, leaving Mom sitting alone at the table. My hands shook as I got into my car, but my resolve didn't waver. This was what I'd been working toward for 10 years. The next morning, I went to the district attorney's office with Howard. We presented everything. The evidence, the witness statements, the forensic analysis, the recordings. The DA, a stern woman named Patricia Coleman, reviewed our materials with increasing interest. This is remarkable, she said. If even half of this holds up, we have grounds to reopen your father's case and prosecute your mother for both the original crime and ongoing embezzlement. It will all hold up, I said confidently. I've spent 10 years making sure of it. Within hours, police arrested Mom at her office. I watched the news coverage from my apartment, seeing her let out in handcuffs just like Dad had been 10 years earlier. But unlike Dad, she was guilty. The media had a field day with the story. Daughter exposes mother's decade-long deception, read the headlines. Woman framed husband, let him rot in prison while she lived free. I gave interviews, appeared on news programs, told my story. Some people praised me for my dedication to justice. Others criticized me for turning against my own mother. I didn't care about public opinion. I cared about one thing: getting Dad out of prison. The legal process moved quickly once the evidence was presented. The DA filed a motion to vacate Dad's conviction based on newly discovered evidence of his innocence and prosecutorial misconduct. Mom's case was more complicated. She was charged with embezzlement, fraud, evidence tampering, perjury, and a dozen other crimes related to both framing Dad and her ongoing theft from her current employer. She tried to fight it at first, hiring expensive lawyers who attacked my evidence and my credibility. But as more witnesses came forward and forensic experts confirmed the forgeries, her defense collapsed. 3 months after I'd confronted her at that restaurant, a judge officially overturned Dad's conviction. He was released from prison after serving 10 years for a crime he didn't commit. I was there waiting when he walked out. He looked the same as during my last visit, but there was something different in his eyes. Hope, relief, and overwhelming emotion. "Clara," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. "You saved me. You gave me back my life." We stood there in the parking lot, both of us crying, finally able to embrace without a glass partition between us. "I should have believed you from the beginning," I said. "I should have visited you, trusted you. You were a child," Dad interrupted gently. "And she's your mother. You had no reason not to believe her. What matters is that when you learned the truth, you fought for it. You spent 10 years of your life proving my innocence. That's more than I could have ever asked for." We went to his sister's house where he'd be staying while he rebuilt his life. Over dinner, I showed him all the letters I'd found, explained everything I'd done, walked him through the decade of investigation. "You were 15 when you found out," Dad said, shaking his head in amazement. "Just a teenager. And you kept it secret for 5 years, gathering evidence, planning everything. That takes incredible strength and patience. I learned it from your letters, I said. You told me to be careful, to wait for the right time. So I did. Dad's eyes filled with tears again. I'm so sorry you had to carry that burden alone. I'm sorry you lost your mother because of what she did. I lost my mother the moment she framed you, I corrected. I just didn't know it yet. The person I thought she was never existed. He was always a criminal and a liar. I just finally saw her clearly. Mom's trial began 6 months later. I testified about finding the letters, about my investigation, about the decade of lies. Sitting on that witness stand, looking at her across the courtroom, I felt nothing but pity. She'd had everything, a family, a career, a life, and she'd destroyed it all through greed and selfishness. The jury convicted her on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in prison, 5 more than Dad had served. I hope this time allows you to reflect on the harm you've caused, the judge said. Not just to your husband but to your daughter, who you manipulated and used for a decade. Mom looked at me as they led her away. I didn't look away. I wanted her to see that I felt no regret, no guilt, no second thoughts. She'd made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences. After the sentencing, reporters swarmed me with questions. How does it feel to see your mother go to prison? Do you regret turning her in? Will you ever forgive her? I answered them honestly. Justice feels right. I don't regret seeking the truth. And forgiveness isn't something I'm thinking about right now. Maybe someday, but not today. Dad and I started rebuilding our relationship properly. He got a job in accounting again, a smaller firm willing to overlook his wrongful conviction. He found an apartment near my college so we could see each other regularly. We had weekly dinners where we talked about everything except Mom. Sometimes we discussed the lost years, the pain and anger we both carried. But mostly we focused on moving forward. You gave up your teenage years to prove my innocence, Dad said during one dinner. That's time you can never get back. I didn't give it up, I corrected. I used it purposefully. And I'd do it again. 6 months after Mom's sentencing, Dad sued the state for wrongful imprisonment. The case settled quickly. The state didn't want the publicity of a trial where their misconduct would be exposed. Dad received a substantial settlement, enough to retire comfortably if he wanted. I'm giving half to you, he told me. You earned it more than I did. I tried to refuse, but he insisted. You spent 10 years of your life fighting for me. This is your compensation too. I used some of the money to finish college debt-free. The rest I saved, knowing that financial security was something Mom had always used as a weapon. I would never be dependent on anyone that way. I graduated college with honors, my degree in criminology leading to a job with an organization that investigated wrongful convictions. My experience made me valuable. I understood how evidence could be manipulated, how innocent people could be framed, how the truth could be buried under layers of lies. You're uniquely qualified for this work, my supervisor told me during training. You've lived both sides of it. I threw myself into the work, helping other families torn apart by false accusations. Each case I helped overturn felt like honoring what Dad had been through. 2 years after Mom's conviction, I received a letter from her in prison. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. Dear Clara, it began. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did to you and your father was unforgivable. But I hope you'll understand that I never meant to hurt you. Everything I did because I was scared and desperate. I made terrible choices and I'm paying for them now. I think about you every day. I wonder if you're happy, if you found peace. I hope you have. I hope you don't carry the burden of what happened with you forever. You deserve better than that. I love you. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. I love you and I'm sorry. Mom. I read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation, for lies, for hidden agendas. But all I found was what seemed like genuine remorse. It didn't change anything. It didn't erase 10 years of deception or repair the damage she'd caused. But it was something. I showed the letter to Dad. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to write back to maintain some connection. But most of me thinks it's healthier to move on completely. There's no wrong answer, Dad said gently. Whatever you decide, I support you. I thought about it for weeks. Finally, I wrote back. Not a long letter, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Mom, I received your letter. I'm not ready to forgive you and I may never be. What you did caused irreparable harm. But I acknowledge your apology and I hope prison gives you time to become a better person. I'm doing well. I'm happy. I'm making a difference. In the world. That's all you need to know. Clara. I sent it and felt a weight lift. I'd spent 10 years of my life focused on exposing her crimes. It was time to focus on my own future. 3 years after her conviction, I got engaged to a man I'd met through work. He knew my whole story and loved me anyway. Dad walked me down the aisle at our wedding, both of us crying happy tears. Now, 5 years after Mom went to prison, I have a life I built on truth rather than lies. I have a career helping wrongfully convicted people. I have a strong relationship with my father. I have a husband who respects and supports me. And I have peace. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I'd never found those letters. If I'd grown up believing Mom's lies, hating my innocent father, never knowing the truth. The thought makes me grateful for that day in the attic when I was 15. Yes, learning the truth destroyed my relationship with my mother. Yes, carrying that secret for 5 years was incredibly difficult. Yes, the confrontation and the legal battle were painful. But the alternative, living a lie forever, would have been worse. I chose truth over comfort. Justice over family loyalty. And I don't regret it for a second. Dad and I have dinner every Sunday now, a tradition we started after he was released. During one recent dinner he asked me something he'd never asked before. Do you ever wish you hadn't found out? That you just lived in ignorance? Never, I said without hesitation. The truth set us both free. It was hard, but it was worth it. Dad smiled and raised his glass. To the truth then. And to my daughter who was brave enough to fight for it even when everyone told her to let it go. To the truth, I echoed. And I meant it. Because what my mother didn't know, what she'd never understood, was that I'd known everything she'd done for 10 years. I'd waited for the right time. I'd been patient, strategic, and relentless. And in the end, the truth had prevailed. Just like I'd always known it would. Mom had taught me to be calculating and patient, though not in the way she'd intended. I'd used those skills against her and they'd worked perfectly. The student had surpassed the teacher. And justice had finally been served.